test audience response that Fox 2000 decided to put it into the Mill Valley Film Festival, so I went over for that. That was the first time I saw it on the big screen. And the Mill Valley Festival is very special for me because that's the first time I saw Shine on the big screen. So it was, and it's a very keen, enthusiastic, regional boutique festival of some prestige in America. So it was good.
What was your experience watching it? What was it like watching it with yours? I know you watched it with your family. What was it like sitting there, hearing the responses? Did you hear different responses to what you anticipated? It's always, it's always a different experience when it's on the screen than what's been on the page or the script page.
As opposed to some of the critics who watch it by themselves in the loneliness of their room. When you see it with 400, 500, 600 people, it's a different communal event on many levels, particularly when the audience is filled with, a multi-generational kind of presence. But I think for an actor, the first time you watch a film, it's like a documentary of the shoot. You're going, oh, I remember that day, it was -12, and I was very cranky and miserable, but damn, do I look good in it. It took me 3 viewings, because we saw quite a number when we were promoting the film through guilds and festivals and industry stuff. And it was only by the 3rd viewing that I started to really appreciate things well. I knew that Sophie was fantastic in it, and I knew that Emily was wonderful. I knew the performances were strong and interesting and textured. But it was only on the 3rd viewing that I realized how Florian Bolhouse's lighting was emotional, not just lighting people. If you notice in the basement scene, sometimes it's almost completely black and there'll just be a beautiful outline on her face or whatever that matches the temperature of the scene. And also John Williams' score, I just think this, hearing it again, because when you're shooting the film, you don't have music underneath certain bits. But he did some solo instrumentation, which I thought was beautiful, and I think the string writing as the film gets darker and slightly more devastating is really quite exquisite. And I know that it was Marcus's intention in the book to always have this balance between how horror and beauty can fight for the same place in a given context.
And Marcus, you were sad with your family. I don't know, were you an author who watched people read at any point? It got to the bit where death talks yet. Did you listen for responses?
Sometimes my wife will be reading. I don't let anyone read anything I've written usually until it's finished, not because of some artistic idea, but just because it's still not finished, and I'm always feeling insecure about how it's looking. And if my wife's reading a manuscript or something and she laughs, whether it's this book or any other book, so what was that? And so in this case, it's similar to what Geoffrey said when I first saw the film. The first time I saw it was with my wife, and it was just the 2 of us. But then I saw it in Los Angeles in the Museum of Tolerance, and there were a similar audience size to this. And you could just feel the real warmth in the room, and yeah, it was a much different atmosphere. And but no, I kind of just sit back, and with the film, it's not the book, it's its own thing. And so it was kind of easy for me. I'm seeing it from the outside even for the first time. And it's kind of nice to let the pressure be on other people for a change. When it's the book, it's all yourself, and it's kind of nice to see it like that as well.
Well, I thought I'd take a litmus test of the warmth in the room. By acclamation, who was a fan of the book? Who had read the book before you arrived tonight? And which begs the fine question, a round of applause if you had not read the book. Well, the good good news for you is the death spoils it anyway, so you should still go and read it. So there's a lot to be gained. Now, I'm going to go to the audience in a moment, so I'll have a quick hands up, hopefully, and a microphone running to you. But I'm just going to quickly ask, obviously everyone who's read the book will notice every single change. I mean, it's almost the first thing you do with the adaptation of a favourite book to screen. I was wondering, how much, is there a particular thing from the script, or even from the shoot, that hasn't made it to the edit, that you Geoffrey, or I don't know how much you'd read the script, that you noticed disappeared by the edit, that you were surprised to see it change?
This scale of budget from Fox 2000, which is a mini studio, by Australian standards, it's a big budget, but by American, it's, I don't know, 25, 30 million or something like that.
The largest lunch.
Yes, but, you know, you're shooting offshore and it's got a certain scale and there's a few CGI bits in there and all that sort of stuff. The bits that changed, there aren't that many because the production team and the people in the accounting offices, they all know what they're doing. They don't want to be throwing too much of that budget onto the floor. So there's only, I lost one of my accordion pieces, which broke my heart. Because that's the one I was going to play when I was the opening act for my accordion teacher when he was on tour.
And I assume it's the Oscars acceptance play.
But look, it's pretty much intact. But in the development of the workshop, we had 2 or 3 weeks before we started shooting, where we just worked in a room, and there's only so much you can do in a room. You can't do Rudy jumping into the river and stuff like that. There were bits, because I had carefully posted notes all the way through the novel that gave me some tangent points of what was in the film script and what was precisely in the novel. And I did fight for things like, which I loved in the novel, where Hans is drinking out on the steps, playing the accordion. I just thought that caught his devil-may-care maverick spirit. And he's also the sort of guy that gets pissed every so often, you know, and likes to yell at Rosa and say, "Shut up." You know. So there were little textures and dimensions that we kind of added, but generally the screenplay was in pretty good shape, I think, when we started.
Was there anything you thought to get into the script?
No, I more just had hopes that certain things would or wouldn't be in there, but I also love the idea that, I mean, one of the things that in the one conversation I had with the producers, we talked a lot about the scene in the book, or the chapter in the book where Max imagines himself fighting Hitler in the basement, and it was something that I know the director really wanted in the film, but they didn't want to risk putting the actual figure of Hitler in, and also taking people out of the forward narrative of the film. And but I would have loved to see that. And but that's what I also love in that some of my favourite books I've seen versus films, and then you go back to the book and it's like this treasure. And that's what I love about being a novelist, and maybe that's one of the things this whole experience has taught me, is to be grateful for what you've got. My set costs nothing, and my actors cost nothing, and I'm the director.
Well, whoever has the microphone, please stand up, and hopefully you will have a great question for us. Where is the microphone at the moment? Go for it. Okay, the microphone's still wandering. Here we go, the microphone is with you. Please stand up.
Okay. Hi Geoffrey, I don't know if you remember me, but I actually asked you a question at the King's speech. Okay. That was great.
Is that your question?
My question was...
Do I remember you?
Yeah, I asked you about if you thing is, did you do any research about the time period in which your character lived, or did you just kind of use the book to inform that character?
No, the book was my greatest reference point. But I had two very distinct memories of when I was a teenager, and I think this is the first time I became aware of the situation in Germany in the early 40s. I would have been about 14, and I remember seeing footage of the siege of Leningrad, which was heartrending. It was 2 heavy winters where the town was sealed off, and people were scraping the wallpaper off the walls to boil it down for the flour and water, glue, to make soup. And it was really quite harrowing, and that made me want to ask questions of my stepdad and mother and to say, well, what was going on there, you know? And the other one was seeing, around about the same time, was stuff from the Weimar Republic, where at the end of the First World War, for a couple of years, people in Berlin were wheeling around wheelbarrows filled with paper money notes that were completely valueless. That was the level of poverty, and that was the kind of severe economic decline that was a big part of that story. But then my wife found a really wonderful book in a second-hand shop, which was called A Day in the Life of the Third Reich. And it went from the first day of Hitler being democratically elected as Chancellor. The next year he declares himself Führer. Then there was the games, and there was Kristallnacht, and then there was the declaration of war, and then there was the final solution, and then there was the cataclysm of the end and the implosion of the whole National Socialist movement. But in and around that, they had a lot of beautiful details of what was happening on the street in small towns, whether they were bread lines or whether they were subversive groups or whether they were the so-called good Germans helping people out and so forth. And that was pretty much enough for me, because I think the spirit in the writing is also through, not only through Liesel's eyes, but through Marcus's eyes, from the thrill that he got of hearing his storyteller parents conveying across 2 or 3 generations what was going on that related to his family situation.
If you have a question, your hand you go high, so you're...
Record, yeah, that's action.
Hi, we've just been to see the Thief movie, and I just waiting to do a signing because Mark Zusak was there and Geoffrey Rush, and it was really nice to hear Geoffrey Rush talk and ask some questions, so we were able to talk and doing that. So it was good. The movie was very touching. It's quite heavy going through the whole thing. But I think the most touching part of it is Uncle and the main girl, how he kind of sensitive to her needs, what she needs, and he's trying to help her through the trauma and speak to his own thoughts. I thought that was one of the main things that came out of the movie. I have to say I enjoyed the book but the movie itself, the little girl's really expressive, and I thought she was a good actor. That's the I want to say there, and it is very touching about, it brings it the situation in Germany, how she grew up, how they felt here. I've never seen that sort of portrayed before, and I thought that was really good. So, and because usually you just see it from the point of view of all the slaughtering of the Jews and all that stuff that happens, but you haven't really heard much about how the actual German people felt themselves, and you know that they were sort of torn in a way into this thing because first their country was in a mess, and then Hitler kind of saved them, but then Hitler turned on the situation around, turned on his own people, of course turned on the Jews as well.
It's good. No, keep going.
Okay. his own people as well. So it's good to see that from that point of view of a child and just living an ordinary life. Just goes to show how ordinary people can be living their lives. History is changing around them, and they just keep sweeping along with it. And how we can cope with that, go through their traumas, and how we can help each other through those times. Is Andrew saying bye?